So I'm a meteorologist. I have 3 degrees in meteorology, but often I get the question, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? My daughter's getting married in 7 months. It's going to be sunny outside. Those are the kind of questions you get as a meteorologist. But more recently, I've been getting this question. Dr. Shepard, do you believe in climate change? Do you believe in global warming? Usually I say my son believes in the tooth fairy. But climate change and climate is like saying, do I believe that the sun's going to rise tomorrow? I mean, science is science, right? So this is a question I get often, and so it inspired me to think about how do we address this question, because there's so many myths out there about climate. And interestingly enough, if you look at climate scientists and the peer-reviewed literature and those expressing a viewpoint, overwhelmingly about 97% of climate scientists who express opinion know that this is a combination of human and natural caused climate change. There's no myth, there's no hoax, there's no conspiracy. Aliens didn't tell us to do it. But the general public thinks otherwise. Let's see. So in fact, this is actually a study, a Six America study, and you can see sort of a breakdown in terms of how climate scientists who express an opinion view this topic and what the general sort of notion is in the general public. So if you look, there are quite a few people that are either disengaged, doubtful, or dismissive in the public, yet those who actually study the science, actually have spent time in school learning about the science, clearly have an understanding of what's going on. So I pose this question here. 97 structural engineers say that this bridge collapses with the next car that drives across it. 3 engineers paid by a business on the other side say it's okay to cross. Are you going to drive across that? Okay. Keep that in context as I give the rest of this talk, because that's basically what we're dealing with here. That's how I look at it anyhow. So what is zombie theories? I don't think the cutest zombies in the world. It's just so cute. But zombie theories are those theories that have been disproven by the science community, yet they live on like zombies in the blogs and on radio shows and in social media, even though scientists have long refuted those. So I want to just kind of explore some of those zombie theories. Climate change is natural, Dr. Shepard. Don't you know that? Well, I have 3 degrees in meteorology. I don't know how I missed that. The climate definitely does change naturally. How would I, that didn't get by me. But certainly we know that there's a human sort of steroid or forcing on top of the natural cycle. We know that the sun affects climate. We know that there are Milankovitch cycles, changes in the Earth's tilt, talking about 23.5 degrees. By the way, any kids in the audience, let me see a show of hands. Yeah. That globe is actually lying to you in your classroom a bit. Because although it's on average at 23.5 degrees, our globe, our Earth does tilt. The tilt changes, it wobbles, the orbit around the sun changes. These are called Milankovitch cycles. So that does cause natural climate change. That's why we get ice ages. But there's actually something on top of that. Dr. Shepard, it's the sun. Don't you know it's the sun? I was in an hotel lobby with a guy on the elevator talking to colleagues, and this guy says, well, you know it's the sun, guys. What are you guys talking about? I'm like, oh, are you a climate scientist? Where have you published that? He said, oh, no, I'm an airline pilot. I was like, well, you certainly don't want me flying your plane. But, you know, you get this. But there's data from NASA and others that suggest that the solar forcing, the changes in the solar forcing cannot describe the type of changes that we see in the trends. 1998, and can't trust the climate models. Well, haven't warmed since 1998. What are you guys talking about? Well, 1998 was an El Nino year. It was a local anomaly. And in fact, most of the warming on our planet is actually in the ocean anyway, and it never sort of trended down in any way. We've had some sessions here at the AMS meeting talking about this apparent pause, but 92% of the warming is in the ocean, and the trends have been steadily upward. And if you read the headlines, this was the warmest year on record. 2014. Well, God, it was cold where I live, Dr. Shepard. It's global warming, not Tucson and the IMAX warming. So we have to sort of move this local or regionalization of our understanding of climate. I often say that weather is your mood and climate is your personality. Because if it snows today, that doesn't say anything about whether climate change is not real. It just says that that's weather. Climate is your personality, weather is your mood. Can't trust the climate. Let me go back to this. We can't trust the climate model. Yeah, that statement actually had some validity 30 years ago. Climate models actually weren't that sophisticated. But our climate models are actually pretty good today. And believe it or not, climate scientists are actually some pretty smart people. So they know some of the issues in their climate models and have tried to do their best to fix those over the way. There's still some deficiencies. There's still some questions that need to be asked. But trust me, folks that are working on climate models have a pretty good sense of what they're doing. Scientists want grant money. Yeah, you guys just want grant money. That's why you're... That's the most ill-posed statement I've ever heard if you understand how science works. Because actually, as a scientist, if I wanted more grant money, I would go up to the National Science Foundation and say, we really don't understand this enough. Please give me grant money to study it. So it's actually counterintuitive to sort of suggest this. We've been warmer in the past. Indeed, we have. We've been much warmer. But when we were warmer in the past, there were probably alligators up at the North Pole. Well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the climate system looked very different. Sea level was much higher. So we're in a different climate system now. So that's an accurate statement, but it's an irrelevant statement when we're talking about the climate system we're dealing with today. It's arrogant or blasphemous to think that humans change climate. Anyone ever heard of the urban heat island? The fact that it's warmer in cities than it is in surrounding areas? That's humans changing the climate. Pollution, the ozone hole, chlorofluorocarbons, humans changing the climate. It's only a few degrees. What's the big deal? I can have cookouts in December in Atlanta. Well, if only if it was that simple. And so that leads me to the next couple of slides. This is a Lake Lanier Reservoir in the Atlanta area. A couple of years ago, we were in a drought, and the city of Atlanta was literally 30 days from being out of its water supply because of drought. So I'm making the point that it's not just 1 degree. That 1 degree has a sensitivity that's very different. If you have a child that has a 1 or 2 degree fever, running a 100-degree fever, all of a sudden that 1 degree doesn't sound like such a small deal. I don't want my child running a 1 or 2 degree fever. The Earth feels 1 degree very differently than our perception. 2012 or so, we had a significant drought in the Midwest. We saw evidence of that in the price of cereal, milk, meat. We're just talking there, even a drought in California. If you had a salad today, probably something in that salad was grown in California. But yet the drought in California, as Jim Gandy, I was talking to about that, probably the prices of those vegetables will be impacted by the Western drought. And Canadian doctors have had to come to the U.S. to learn how to treat Lyme disease because they didn't used to be able to deal with it. And I've got a Canadian. So, vectors actually, you haven't had Lyme disease, have you? The Canadian vectors actually, they're having to deal with these vectors that actually can thrive there now because it's 1 degree. And we're talking about even greater. So how do we become zombie-proof? I want to end this with some positive suggestions going forward. How do we become zombie-proof? Because you're going to get these zombies. You hear them. You do. Frame the climate issue in terms of business, risk, security, and opportunity. No matter what your political, this is not a political issue. It's been framed as such, but it's a human issue. No matter if you're liberal, conservative, whatever. You understand business risk, security, and opportunity. This is Jeff Seabright, Koch's Vice President for the Environment, talking about how increased drought has impacted water supply, some of the ingredients they use in their soda products, in their juice products, because they actually own Minute Maid. So there's a business case that people like Coca-Cola and other companies are thinking about. The military. Admiral Locklear, the top brass in the Navy for the Pacifics, he said he views climate change as his chief threat in the Pacific Theater. There's a little country called North Korea over there in the Pacific Theater too, but he said he viewed climate change because of things like climate refugees and sea level threats and responses to, the Navy is typically one of the leading responders in terms of humanitarian aid and disaster. And there's also opportunity in terms of renewables. Why do we think that it has to be an either or? Why can't it be a mix? It has to be a combination. A climate-informed public is essential to moving solutions from incremental to monumental. Part of the problem is that people will fall for these zombie theories because the average public has about an 8th grade science literacy. So you all know this in the desert, but many people find it just counterintuitive to think that it can get cold in the desert. But it does. Many people find it counterintuitive to think that the Earth is closer to the sun in January than it is in July. So that also, they find it counterintuitive to think because it's snowing or they had a cold winter in the eastern United States that climate change or global warming is real. You've got to be able to sort of increase climate literacy. This is actually an interstate here in the Phoenix area from a few months back. Stormwater management engineered for rainstorms of the last century. It rains harder, but the storms, water management systems are engineered for the rainstorms of the 1950s and 1960s. People need to understand that. That's a climate literacy. So we must raise our climate literacy dramatically in order to move the discussion forward and slay the climate zombies. I feel like I need a lightsaber right now for some reason. I don't know. So these are my two kids, Alyssa and Anderson. They were actually just walking the halls of this very museum a few days ago. And for their sake, I really hope the critics are right when they say this is a hoax, or that we're making this up. I really hope they're right. I don't want to be right. But unfortunately, science suggests otherwise. So it's really all of our jobs to get our lightsabers and slay the climate zombies. Thank you.